Hey guys, alright? Welcome everyone. Today we are going to recap a thriller and horror movie called The Messengers 2 from 2009. So stay tuned and let's go together for this recap. In the middle of a cornfield at night, a woman is running scared from what appears to be someone with a sickle. Already very tired, she stops a little, but she is almost killed. And seeing that the danger has not passed, she continues to run for her life. But it doesn't go very far, because evil finds her and kills her. One morning, a man named John tries to fix his water pump to irrigate his cornfield. His wife named Mary worries about him as he spends a lot of time tending the farm and has left the church behind. They have two children named Lindsay, the eldest, and Michael, the youngest. The next day, John and his daughter go to buy more grain for planting, but the owner wants to talk to him first. Moments later, John leaves upset, as he was not allowed to sell to him on credit again, as he already owed enough. John returns home and notices that his crop is dying. Soon crows are taking over everywhere and John tries to get them out but is unsuccessful. He then decides to cut everything down and goes to get a sickle from the barn. However, he ends up discovering by chance an old compartment, and looking inside, he finds something wrapped in cloths. John unrolls it and finds it to be a scary doll, a scarecrow. He then takes it outside and his son approaches, but not feeling well with the doll's presence. John says it was meant to scare away the crows, but Michael has a bad feeling that Scarecrow is up to no good. His son gets scared and asks him not to use it. So after insisting for a while, John promises him he won't use it and then stores it in the barn. When John goes to leave some corn in the barn, the Scarecrow moves, giving him a big fright. But it was only Mary who was there messing with some things. When John asks what she was doing, Mary says she was gathering up some old stuff to sell to a man named Tommy. Afterwards they leave the barn and John notices that the crows do not leave the farm. At dusk, with everyone asleep, we see the Scarecrow and the barn door strangely slowly opening by itself. In the morning, John sees crows coming out of the barn and goes there to check his corn, discovering that it has already been eaten by crows. And then the man named Judge comes to see how John's harvest is doing, for his is also bad. He brings him some beers as a present, jokingly saying it was for trespassing on his farm there just now. Judge notices that John has a scarecrow and encourages him to use it in the fields. John then has second thoughts about not putting the scarecrow in his cornfield as he promised Michael. So, finally, he decides to put the doll there. When John finishes putting the scarecrow on a cross, he begins to hear the sound of a child humming and, thinking it is his son Michael, goes to look for him, but does not find anyone. John then returns home and, seeing Michael, asks if he was playing in the corn just now, but the boy just says no. His daughter Lindsay goes to a friend's house and her father lets her go. When John talks to his wife, he tells her that he heard a child's voice in the corn earlier. However, Mary questions the fact that he is worrying too much about the harvest. Mary tries to cheer her husband up and comforts him, then takes him to bed. Later, when John leaves his house, he notices a dead crow on the doorstep. But what impresses him most is the fact that he has hundreds of them scattered across the field and cornfield. John goes to the Scarecrow and notices that crows have surrounded them. And then, one of the bank managers arrives at John's property and goes to him to remind him of his debt to the bank, the loan he took and still hasn't paid, and that the next day he will have to mortgage his farm. Then he also says that it would be better for John to sell everything to pay off the debt, which he would not be able to harvest in time to pay what he owes. John, however, insists, saying that his luck is changing seeing the dead crows, but the man, seeing that John refuses to sell everything, leaves. John continues to collect the crows when he suddenly sees a woman on the other side of the fence and is drawn to look at her. When suddenly the water pump starts working and John hides from the woman, who starts to take off her clothes, but soon she sees him and he runs away. At night, the bankman returns to John's farm to place a sign warning that the farm will be mortgaged, and this to frighten John. Then, he enters the cornfield to urinate in his field, this being a way to try to humiliate John. When suddenly he hears something and tries to get back to his car, but someone almost hits him with the scythe. Desperate, he runs and returns to the road, when suddenly he is surprised by a truck that runs over him. In the morning, the police arrive at John's house. The policeman named Milton questions him about the bankman, and John claims that they spoke the day before. Milton asks him where he was at dawn, when Mary arrives and says that John was with her all night. The officer says the man was killed by being run over and dragged for 3 kilometers. This leaves them stunned and then Milton leaves. Mary tells John that she is going to offer condolences to the deceased family and bring food. A noble gesture, but John tells them they don't need them as the family is very wealthy. Mary, with this, is worried about her husband's behavior, which was quite different. John goes back to the cornfield and checks on the crop, when strangely he ends up finding several dollar bills on the floor and follows them, which leads to the cross where the Scarecrow was. Another intriguing fact is that the deceased's watch is located there, when suddenly he hears a child talking in the cornfields, but he does not see anyone. John then notices someone moving among the cornfields, when suddenly he hears screams and runs scared out of the plantation. Jude comes up to him and questions him why he is so scared. John then responds that he heard voices in the cornfield. However, Jude does not give much credit to what he says and says that he has also heard voices several times. Yet this happens when you are very tired from work. John, however, says that he heard something real and shows the deceased's watch. But Jude says that maybe the watch fell and got lost there, telling John to relax more and go sell the object, as the rich widow wouldn't need it and then leave. John takes his car and goes to buy more seeds, only now having the money, but he didn't even have to pay due to the big wave of luck he was having, because whoever correctly weighs the grains gets everything for free. Later John plants again and stays until night. As he walks back home he finds his wife talking to a man named Tommy. She was telling him how John had changed with her. John listens to the entire conversation and observes that Tommy was trying to win over Mary, remembering the past and how it would be if they had stayed together. Before leaving, Tommy offers a place for her and the children, saying they could stay whenever they wanted. Then he hugs her and leaves. Then Mary meets him outside and talks to him for a while. John then shows regret for how they have been living life with their family lately and proposes that they seek counseling at the church. This makes Mary happy as she sees that John is looking for something to improve their relationship. Mary then goes up to the bedroom and says she'll wait for him in bed, while John sits and thinks for a while. He doesn't go to his room and get some corn to eat and ends up giving in to the drink. Then he falls asleep looking at the plantation. When he wakes up at dawn, he eats the corn again, but he finds a human tooth in the cob and throws it to the ground. Then strangely John sees his son entering the cornfield and follows him. When he catches up, John asks what he was doing there, but his son asks him to get rid of the scarecrow, saying that the puppet knew that Michael knew what he was. John then hugs him but soon notices straws stained with blood on his back dissolving in the boy's body, then realizes it's just a hallucination. However, when he looks at the scarecrow he realizes that he himself is nailed to the wood and frightened by the rope of his nightmare. Mary is at her side and notices that the corn is much better. John goes there to see his plantation. Mary then discovers that John has taken up drinking again. John in the corn notes that the corns are healthy, but at one place he finds a ring and is apparently not surprised. He then picks it up and heads back home, when suddenly John hears something strange coming from his house and runs. Arriving there, his wife had been injured because she received a call informing that Tommy had taken his own life. However, Mary notices the ring John was wearing, saying it was Tommy's. John says that he found this in the cornfield and she is scared, but he tries to calm her down by saying that maybe he knows what's going on and says that nothing bad will happen to her. Moments later John goes to the scarecrow and tries to pull it out of the wood but ends up injuring himself. John does not give up and takes the axe, but when he returns he ends up getting lost in the plantation and has hallucinations that make him dizzy. John then notices that the leaves are spilling blood and then a little girl appears in front of him. She starts to tell him that her father thought it would make things better, and then asks John if he knows what's going on with his family. When suddenly the girl is as if she had been killed and John runs out of there, returning to his house to look for Mary and her children, but he does not find them. He takes a beer from the fridge and drinks some. He is then startled by seeing the scarecrow in the mirror's reflection. John then again heads to the plantation and manages to knock the scarecrow down. Already at night he begins to burn the doll. Mary then arrives home along with her children and goes to talk to John. She says she tried really hard for their relationship to improve, but that John didn't go to counseling that night, that he's turning his attention to something else. She is very upset because she had decided to believe in John, but he didn't help her with that, and to make matters worse she's scared of him, because in explanations he had Tommy's ring. Not wanting to go home that night, John goes to Judy's trailer. However, Miranda, the woman John saw earlier in the plantation, welcomes him. She offers him tea and says she's Judy's wife. Miranda, however, wanting something else, says that Judy left and won't come back until the next day. So John tries to leave, but the woman is very interested in helping him with his injured hand and he finally decides to stay. A month after helping him, she says she's been watching him and felt attracted. So he tries to go home but starts to feel bad. Miranda then, taking advantage of this, satisfies with John, who is unable to react to the story and react to raped. In the morning, John wakes up and returns home. When he enters the cornfield he notices that the scarecrow was again hanging in the same spot. He goes ahead and goes home and is asked by his daughter if it was worth paying more attention to the plantation than to his own family. John then enters to apologize to Mary, but she is still furious with his actions and questions him if he is attracting her. John asks her to stop saying those things, but Mary tells him to go away and he does. In the barn, John approaches John with a small axe, but he has only come to talk to John about the problem he is going through. John then tells that last night he burned the scarecrow, but Judy says that she saw the doll that is still in one piece hanging in the field. And John says he thinks the scarecrow has something to do with the deaths that happened. Judy then calls John to talk to Miranda as she knows very different things. When they get there, Miranda picks up a book that contains writings on black magic, in which her father had taken that book from a dead Indian. John opens the book and sees that the scarecrow story is true. Judy says that the being did what he wanted, but John says he didn't want the men to die. But Judy strangely confronts him and says it was John's wish, and if the scarecrow does things outside of its purpose, it's because John doesn't think straight. Judy also says that she already knew about the being and that his family came a long way using that magic and acquired many lands, saying that John could have a lot too. Miranda then says that John needs to concentrate and so the scarecrow would help. They say that John needs to remove the obstacles that are his family. So afraid of something happening to them, John quickly returns to his house. On the way, however, he meets Milton and asks about his family. Milton says they're fine and asks what was going on. John then takes Milton to the barn and shows him where it all began, and they enter the compartment where the scarecrow was found. John tries to explain to Milton that the scarecrow protects him and the earth, hence the reason for the deaths. For the people who died wanted John's harm. Milton, not believing him, asks him to follow him to the police station, when suddenly they hear a noise, and when John checks it, he is startled by the presence of Judy and Miranda. Milton at that moment is injured and faints. John leaves to speak with Judy, who warns him to let the scarecrow keep taking care of things. Mary then arrives there and asks what was going on. John goes to her to show her the truth and Judy can prove it, but when he turns around, he doesn't see either of them, appearing to be just hauntings. Mary complains again about John's behavior, but he says it's not him but the scarecrow. John tells Mary that he has seen things she doesn't think are real, and he shows the book containing the scarecrow's magic ritual. When Mary opens it, she surprises John by showing that it is just a Bible. Then she sees Milton lying on the ground, and thinking that John is crazy killing people, she runs desperately. John then takes a spiked hook and Mary goes to get her children to leave. When then she realizes that someone invades her house and they lock themselves inside the room thinking it is John. Moments later, Mary looks through the keyhole to see if anyone was still there, when suddenly someone starts wanting to enter the room. Mary and her children then leave through the window, and then John manages to enter the room asking them to come back. However, Mary tells her children to keep running and they enter the plantation. It doesn't take long and she loses Michael, and with her daughter they start looking for him, while on the other hand the scared Michael tries to find them. John finds a body and goes to check it out. He ends up running into Miranda and Judy, who have their hair cut. However, being only ghosts, they tell John to let the scarecrow take his family, for the bounty of the earth had been given to him. Michael leaves the plantation and hides inside the barn, but someone holds him there. He is very scared, and suddenly behind him appears the feared scarecrow that begins to detach itself from the wood. The boy runs but is chased by the terrifying being in any way to take his life. Meanwhile, Mary is still looking for him, but ends up meeting John, who, seeing that Michael wasn't with her, already thinks the worst. Meanwhile, in the barn, Michael hides upstairs but is soon attacked. For a moment the attack ceases and the ladder snaps into place. We see that it is Milton who has awakened but is soon pulled and unfortunately killed by the being in front of Michael, who, seeing that scene, screams, and this alerts John to where he is. Quickly John arrives at the barn and sees the scarecrow killing Milton. He tries to fight the being but not having enough strength is knocked out. Mary and her daughter are approaching and the scarecrow stops. Mary is left with John lying on the floor and Lindy goes to her brother. But before he can climb the stairs, he is surprised by the scarecrow that grabs him. Mary will soon try to help her and cut off the doll's arms, but still wanting to kill everyone, he doesn't give up. When then Michael starts the tractor and John grabs the scarecrow, managing to throw it to the ground. Then Michael goes over him, leaving the scarecrow in pieces. The family is relieved that they are still alive, but too soon, as the scarecrow had not yet died and attacks John. So everyone goes up to the scarecrow and starts tearing the being apart by taking its straws from it. Already at dawn they leave the barn and return home. Moments later we see the little girl who haunted John in the corn earlier. She collects the remains of the scarecrow and then returns with it into the compartment where it was found, where we realize that he is the beginning of everything that will start again.